The Galactic Confederation study ship hung silently above Earth, cloaked from detection by technology centuries beyond human understanding. Commander Ta stood on the observation deck, his tall, slender form casting a long shadow across the polished floor. His skin, a pale gray that reflected the soft blue lighting, wrinkled around his large eyes as he studied the data flowing across multiple screens. Earth turned slowly below them, a blue-green jewel against the blackness of space. The planet appeared peaceful from this distance, but the data told a different story. Another regional conflict has broken out, Ta said, gesturing to a blinking indicator. Their seventh this decade. Jai-Ho moved closer, his four eyes blinking in rhythmic sequence as he processed the information. Unlike Ta's gray complexion, Jai-Ho's skin had a slight purple tinge, marking him as from the southern colonies. Fascinating, Jai-Ho remarked. Look at their production rates during wartime. They've doubled their technological output in just 5 standard cycles. Ta nodded solemnly. It's their pattern. They fight, they innovate, they advance. Then they'd fight again with better weapons. The observation team had been monitoring Earth for nearly 50 years. What had begun as a routine catalog mission had evolved into a long-term study. Humans were unusual, violent yet creative, destructive yet innovative. The Confederation Council found them endlessly fascinating. The council meeting yesterday, Jai-Ho said, lowering his voice though they were alone on the deck. There was talk of opening diplomatic channels soon. Tay turned sharply. They suggested contact. Already. Several members believe humans are ready to join the interstellar community. Todd gestured toward the screens showing military movements across Earth's surface. Look at them, Jai-Ho. They can't stop fighting themselves. They're not ready for the complexities of galactic politics. Jai-Ho's upper eyes narrowed while his lower ones remained fixed on the data. I tend to agree, Commander. But the resource division sees potential in human labor and creativity. Ta sighed. A sound like wind through hollow reeds. Always the resources. Always the expansion. He tapped a control, bringing up a historical overlay of human conflicts. They need more time. At least another century. What neither knew was that their regular reports to the Confederation had been intercepted for years. The Juxar, longtime rivals of the Confederation, had developed sophisticated methods of tapping into secure transmissions. In a dimly lit command center several light-years away, General Sang reviewed the latest intercepted data on humans with growing interest. His red-scaled skin gleamed in the light of multiple displays, the ridge of spines along his head raised in excitement. Play the last transmission again, he ordered. A subordinate tapped controls, and Commander Tay's voice filled the room. Their adaptability in combat situations exceeds any species we've encountered at this development stage. They create solutions we wouldn't conceive of. Sang's mouth, filled with pointed teeth, curved into what his species considered a smile. The Juxar had been at war with the Confederation for nearly 30 years, a grinding conflict that stretched across multiple star systems. Their resources were depleted, their forces tired. These humans could be exactly what we need, Sang said, rising from his command chair. His tall, powerful form towered over his officers. They fight creatively. They adapt quickly. And the Confederation considers them too primitive to contact. His second-in-command, a battle-scarred veteran named Ba, looked uncertain. The protocols forbid interfering with developing worlds, General. Protocols the Confederation created, Sang snapped. We've never agreed to such restrictions. He paced the command deck, his clawed feet clicking against the metallic floor. Prepare 3 ships. We'll make contact immediately. Should we not study them further? Ba suggested cautiously. No time, Sang replied. The latest reports from the front lines are concerning. We need an advantage now. 3 weeks later, as dawn broke over the eastern United States, 3 massive ships appeared in Earth's sky. Unlike the subtle observation vessel of the Confederation, the Juxar ships made no attempt to hide. They positioned themselves over major cities: New York, Beijing, and Moscow, their massive hulls blocking the morning sun. Global panic ensued. Military forces worldwide went on high alert. Communication systems overloaded as billions tried to understand what was happening. Religious groups proclaimed the end times. Stock markets crashed. Then the messages began. Appearing on every screen, in every language, the Juxar presented themselves as friends seeking alliance against galactic oppressors. They offered technological marvels beyond human understanding: clean energy, advanced medicine, faster transportation, all in exchange for military partnership. "We ask only for your unique skills," the message concluded. "Help us secure peace among the stars." World leaders gathered in emergency session. Military analysts debated the aliens' true intentions. Scientists examined the limited technological samples the Juxar provided. "This could advance humanity by centuries," argued one faction. "It could also lead us into a war we don't understand," countered another. After weeks of tense negotiation, Earth's major powers reached a cautious agreement. They would provide limited military support, special forces units, tactical advisors, combat engineers, in exchange for specific technologies. The arrangement would be reviewed after one Earth year. The Juxar, expecting resistance, were pleasantly surprised by the relatively quick agreement. General Sang addressed his war council with satisfaction. "The humans are even more eager than we anticipated. Their desire for advanced technology overrides their caution." Far away, in the central hub of the Confederation, Analyst Ha reviewed the intelligence with growing alarm. Unlike most of her kind, her skin was an unusual shade of blue-gray, marking her as from the coastal regions. Her large eyes darted between screens showing Juxar ships departing Earth with the first contingent of human soldiers. "They've done it," she said, her voice tight with concern. "The Juxar have recruited humans." Her superior, Director Quan, studied the data with his 3 eyes narrowed. The Council underestimated Juxar desperation. Had brought up combat simulations based on human military history. "We must warn High Command immediately. These humans exhibit concerning tactical adaptability. Their unpredictable approaches to warfare could completely destabilize the conflict." "Perhaps this will be a minor development," Quan suggested hopefully. Ha's expression remained grim. "No, Director. I've studied them extensively. This will become problematic for everyone involved, especially the Juxar. They think they found a tool, but they may have unleashed something they cannot control." Captain Su stood at the edge of the landing zone, watching as the last transport ships departed back into Nexus's purple-tinged sky. The air smelled strange here, like cinnamon mixed with metal. Around him, his squad of 40 human special forces soldiers checked their equipment and studied their new surroundings with professional curiosity. "So this is what an alien world looks like," said Lieutenant Han, coming to stand beside him. "Doesn't seem that different from the volcanic regions back home." Su nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. Nexus was mostly flat, with occasional rocky ridges rising from expanses of purple vegetation that resembled tall grass. The twin suns overhead cast double shadows that took some getting used to. "Different enough," Su replied. "The gravity's lighter. Air's thinner. Stay hydrated." 6 months had passed since Earth had entered its alliance with the Juxar. After intensive training on Earth with alien technology and tactics, this was the first deployment of human forces to an actual conflict zone. Su's team had been selected for their adaptability and combat experience, qualities the Juxar specifically requested. A Juxar officer approached them, moving with the characteristic fluid grace of his species. Colonel Quan stood nearly 7 feet tall, his red-scaled skin catching the sunlight. The tendrils around his face, sensory organs that detected changes in air pressure and temperature, waved gently as he walked. "Captain Su," Quan said, his translator converting his clicking speech into clear English. "Your team will secure the western approach. Follow me for briefing." Inside the command tent, Quan displayed holographic maps of the surrounding 50 miles. He pointed to a position between two ridges. Your unit will establish defenses here. The Confederation forces have been pushing from the north. This position must hold. Su studied the map carefully, his brow furrowing. The position was in a low basin with higher ground on three sides, east, north, and west. With respect, sir, we're exposed on three sides here, Su pointed out. Any attacking force would have the high ground advantage. Quan's facial tendrils twitched in what the humans had learned indicated irritation or dismissal. Follow orders, human. Our doctrine has served us for centuries. Then the messages began. Appearing on every screen, in every language, the Juxar presented themselves as friends seeking alliance against galactic oppressors. They offered technological marvels beyond human understanding, clean energy, advanced medicine, faster transportation, all in exchange for military partnership. We ask only for your unique skills, the message concluded. Help us secure peace among the stars. World leaders gathered in emergency session. Military analysts debated the aliens' true intentions. Scientists examined the limited technological samples the Juxar provided. This could advance humanity by centuries, argued one faction. It could also lead us into a war we don't understand, countered another. After weeks of tense negotiation, Earth's major powers reached a cautious agreement. They would provide limited military support, special forces units, tactical advisors, combat engineers, in exchange for specific technologies. The arrangement would be reviewed after one Earth year. The Juxar, expecting resistance, were pleasantly surprised by the relatively quick agreement. General Sang addressed his war council with satisfaction. The humans are even more eager than we anticipated. Their desire for advanced technology overrides their caution. Far away, in the central hub of the Confederation, Analyst Ha reviewed the intelligence with growing alarm. Unlike most of her kind, her skin was an unusual shade of blue-gray, marking her as from the coastal regions. Her large eyes darted between screens showing Juxar ships departing Earth with the first contingent of human soldiers. They've done it, she said, her voice tight with concern. The Juxar have recruited humans. Her superior, Director Quan, studied the data with his three eyes narrowed. The council underestimated Juxar desperation. Hyde brought up combat simulations based on human military history. We must warn High Command immediately. These humans exhibit concerning tactical adaptability. Their unpredictable approaches to warfare could completely destabilize the conflict. Perhaps this will be a minor development, Quan suggested hopefully. Ha's expression remained grim. No, Director, I've studied them extensively. This will become problematic for everyone involved, especially the Juxar. They think they found a tool, but they may have unleashed something they cannot control. Captain Su stood at the edge of the landing zone, watching as the last transport ships departed back into Nexus's purple-tinged sky. The air smelled strange here, like cinnamon mixed with metal. Around him, his squad of 40 human special forces soldiers checked their equipment and studied their new surroundings with professional curiosity. So this is what an alien world looks like, said Lieutenant Han, coming to stand beside him. Doesn't seem that different from the volcanic regions back home. Su nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. Nexus was mostly flat, with occasional rocky ridges rising from expanses of purple vegetation that resembled tall grass. The twin suns overhead cast double shadows that took some getting used to. Different enough, Su replied. The gravity's lighter, air's thinner. Stay hydrated. 6 months had passed since Earth had entered its alliance with the Juxar. After intensive training on Earth with alien technology and tactics, this was the first deployment of human forces to an actual conflict zone. Su's team had been selected for their adaptability and combat experience, qualities the Juxar specifically requested. A Juxar officer approached them, moving with the characteristic fluid grace of his species. Colonel Quan stood nearly 7 feet tall, his red-scaled skin catching the sunlight. The tendrils around his face, Sensory organs that detected changes in air pressure and temperature waved gently as he walked. "Captain Su," Quan said, his translator converting his clicking speech into clear English. "Your team will secure the western approach. Follow me for briefing." Inside the command tent, Quan displayed holographic maps of the surrounding 50 miles. He pointed to a position between two ridges. "Your unit will establish defenses here. The Confederation forces have been pushing from the north. This position must hold." Su studied the map carefully, his brow furrowing. The position was in a low basin with higher ground on three sides: east, north, and west. "With respect, sir, we're exposed on three sides here," Su pointed out. "Any attacking force would have the high ground advantage." Quan's facial tendrils twitched in what the humans had learned indicated irritation or dismissal. "Follow orders, human. Our doctrine has served us for centuries." Standard doctrine would suggest holding the ridgeline instead. Su persisted. "We could cover more territory with fewer troops." "The ridges are unstable," Quan replied curtly. "We've lost troops there before. The basin position is final." Later, as his team set up their defensive perimeter in the basin, Lieutenant Jin approached Su. "This position is a death trap," Jin said quietly. "First rule of combat: never let your enemy have the high ground." "I know," Su said, "but we follow orders for now. Map everything. Note all escape routes. Have Han's team cache emergency supplies in those caves we passed." For 2 days, they fortified their position as best they could, digging in and establishing sensor perimeters. Su sent small scouting parties to familiarize themselves with the surrounding terrain, memorizing paths that weren't on the official maps. On the 3rd day, just before dawn, their sensors detected movement to the north. "Multiple contacts," reported Sergeant Park at the communications station. "Confederation forces, at least 200, moving fast." "Alert Juxar command," Su ordered. Park tried the communications system repeatedly. "No response, sir. The channels are jammed." Su grabbed his rifle. "Battle stations. Prepare for." The first energy blasts hit their northern barrier, vaporizing the reinforced wall they'd constructed. Through the dust, Su could see Confederation troops, tall, gray-skinned aliens in light armor, pouring over the northern ridge. "East Ridge is compromised too," Han shouted over the comlink. "They're flanking us." According to Juxar protocol, when communications failed and forces were outnumbered, the proper response was immediate tactical retreat to predetermined rallying points. But Su had studied the Confederation attack patterns and noticed something. "They're expecting us to run south," he told his officers as they gathered in the command bunker. "That's why they haven't sealed that route yet. They want to pick us off during retreat." "What's the play, Captain?" Jin asked. Su knelt and quickly sketched in the dirt floor of the bunker. "We're going to split into 3 teams. Han, take your team around that eastern ridge. Use the caves we mapped. Jin, circle through the marshlands to the west. My team will make a noisy feint toward the south to draw their attention." "A classic pincer movement," Han nodded. With a twist, Su added, "Their sensors can't penetrate the mineral deposits in those caves, and the marsh gases will mask your heat signatures. They won't see you coming until it's too late. We'll catch them in a crossfire they won't expect." Jin finished. The plan worked with devastating effectiveness. As Su's team made a fighting retreat southward, drawing the bulk of the Confederation forces after them, Han and Jin's teams circled behind the enemy. The Confederation troops, expecting simple retreat according to Juxar doctrine, found themselves caught between 3 forces. By midday, the Confederation attack had collapsed. Their forces retreated in disarray, leaving behind equipment and wounded. When the communication systems came back online 2 hours later, Colonel Quan arrived with reinforcements, only to find the battle already over. He stared at the battlefield results displayed on his tactical pad in disbelief. 43 enemy casualties, 68 captured. The rest retreated, he read. "And your losses?" "2 wounded, sir. None critical." Sue reported. Quan's facial tendrils twitched rapidly. You disobeyed direct orders. Protocol demands retreat when communications are lost and forces are outnumbered. We adapted to changing conditions, Sue replied evenly. Retreat would have resulted in higher casualties. Your orders were clear, Quan persisted, though there was a new note in his voice. Not anger, but curiosity. With respect, Colonel, our orders were to hold this position. We held it. Sue gestured to the captured Confederation equipment and gained valuable intelligence in the process. That evening, as his team rested and repaired their defenses, Sue overheard Juxar officers discussing the battle. Unprecedented tactics, one was saying. The Confederation commander reported chaos in their ranks when the humans appeared behind them. 3 separate squads operating independently without central communication. Another added, our forces would never attempt such coordination without command structure. Across Confederation command centers light years away, reports about the battle circulated rapidly. Field Commander Ta read them with growing concern. The humans fight unlike any species we've encountered, he wrote in his assessment. They don't follow predictable patterns. They improvise constantly. He paused before adding the final line. We may have greatly underestimated the danger they pose if properly motivated and equipped. General Sang stood before the Juxar High Command, his posture rigid with pride as he presented the battle statistics from the past 3 months. The massive chamber, carved from a single piece of red crystal, amplified his voice as he spoke. The human units have achieved an 87% success rate across all engagements, he announced. Their casualties remain minimal while Confederation losses continue to mount. The 7 members of the High Command exchanged glances. Supreme Commander Da, the eldest among them, leaned forward on his crystalline throne. These results exceed our projections, Da said. How many human soldiers achieved this? Just under 500, Sang replied. A murmur ran through the chamber. One of the commanders, her scales a deeper red than the others, spoke up. 500. Against Confederation battle groups numbering in the thousands. Yes, Commander Rin. The humans use small teams operating independently. They strike with precision rather than overwhelming force. Day tapped his clawed fingers against the arm of his throne. We need more of them. Back on Earth, the United Defense Council received the Juxar request for additional troops with mixed reactions. The chamber was filled with military and political leaders from the major powers, all studying the reports from the first deployment. They want 5,000 more personnel, Defense Secretary Lee announced. Special forces, tactical advisors, and engineering teams. Our current forces have performed exceptionally, noted General Park. The Juxar are clearly impressed. President Yoon, who had been quietly reading through the reports, looked up. Which means we have leverage. What are they offering in exchange? The same technology package as before, Lee replied. President Yoon shook her head. Not good enough. We've seen what our troops can do for them. The terms must improve. 3 weeks of tense negotiations followed. The Juxar, desperate to maintain their new advantage, eventually agreed to Earth's demands. Advanced medical technology, previously withheld, access to faster-than-light drive systems, and mining rights on 2 resource-rich moons in the Juxar territory. With the new agreement signed, Earth prepared its expanded forces. Admiral Sun, a veteran naval strategist with 40 years of combat experience, was appointed as chief military advisor to the Juxar fleet. Sun arrived at the Juxar Central Command Station, a massive orbital facility that served as headquarters for their war effort. The station orbited a gas giant in a system 10 light-years from the nearest contested border. His first meeting with the Juxar command staff did not go smoothly. Your formations are too rigid, Sun explained, pointing to holographic displays of recent battles. Your response time's too slow. We need to introduce unpredictability. Colonel Quan, recently promoted for his sector's success with human troops, translated for the other commanders. Many responded with skepticism. Our battle doctrines have been refined over centuries, One commander objected. The hierarchical command structure ensures order and discipline. It also ensures predictability. Sun countered. The Confederation knows exactly how you'll respond to any given situation. That's why they've held their own despite your technological advantages. He pulled up footage from Captain Su's engagement on Nexus. Look here. Small units acting independently, making tactical decisions in the field without waiting for orders from above. This is how we'll win. Chaos, another commander muttered. Adaptability, Sun corrected. And your forces can learn it. Over the next months, Sun implemented new training protocols. Juxar officers resistant to change were reassigned. Those who embraced the human methods were promoted. The rigid command structure began to loosen. Sun introduced concepts the Juxar had never considered: psychological warfare, guerrilla tactics, decentralized command. Most radical was his insistence that junior officers be empowered to make battlefield decisions without consulting superiors. Trust your subordinates, he told a class of Juxar officers. They see the battlefield from angles you cannot. The results were dramatic. Confederation forces, accustomed to the predictable Juxar responses, found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Supply convoys were ambushed along routes previously considered safe. Command centers suffered precision strikes during shift changes. Small Juxar units would appear, cause damage, and vanish before counterattacks could be organized. The Confederation began losing ground across multiple sectors. 6 months into Admiral Sun's tenure, Juxar forces captured a Confederation command ship. Among the prisoners was Commander Wu, a high-ranking Confederation officer with access to their strategic planning. Admiral Sun personally conducted the interrogation, using no coercion beyond pointed questions and psychological pressure. Your forces are retreating across all sectors, Sun noted. Why haven't you adapted to our tactics? Wu, his gray skin pale from stress, stared at the human with his large eyes. We've tried, he admitted, but your approaches defy analysis. When we prepare for one tactic, you employ another. That's basic strategy, Sun replied. Nothing special. Perhaps for humans, Wu said. Our species values order and pattern. Yours seems to thrive in chaos. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. Your human allies don't just defeat us, he continued. They break our will to continue fighting. They target our supply lines rather than our strongholds. They attack when we rest and vanish when we respond. Our troops fear night operations now. They say humans can see in darkness. Sun made notes. An interesting psychological advantage. We'll exploit that. Later, sharing this intelligence with General Sang, Sun recommended increasing nighttime operations. If they believe we have superior night vision, let's reinforce that belief. Sang's facial tendrils waved in amusement. Deception as a weapon. My species would never have considered this. Deception is humanity's oldest weapon, Sun replied. Older than the spear or the bow. Light years away, in the sacred chambers of the Confederation Council, 23 representatives from the allied species gathered in emergency session. The chamber, a perfect sphere aligned with seats arranged in concentric circles, hummed with concerned voices. Council Elder Min, his age evident in his deeply wrinkled gray skin, called the session to order. As the oldest living member of the Confederation, his words carried special weight. The war proceeds poorly, he began. The Juxar advance continues on all fronts. Strategic displays showed the territories lost in recent months. The patterns were clear and alarming. These new tactics, said Councillor Ha, who had warned of human potential months earlier, they bear no resemblance to traditional Juxar approaches. Because they are not Juxar tactics, Min replied. They are human. He brought up intelligence reports and captured communications. We underestimated these humans, Council Elder Min admitted, his voice heavy. We thought them primitive because their technology lags behind, but their warfare strategies. He shook his head slowly. They've changed the nature of this conflict entirely. What do you propose? asked Counselor Jio. Min looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member. "We must either seek peace," he said gravely, "or find human allies of our own." Dr. Yoon wiped her tired eyes and stared at the glowing screen in front of her. She had been working for 36 hours straight, decoding the alien data cores captured in the last Confederation outpost raid. The small crystalline devices held vast amounts of information, but translating alien computer language had proven challenging. Her lab in the United Earth Defense Research Facility was cluttered with equipment, empty coffee cups, and notes scribbled on whatever paper she could find. 3 other researchers had given up hours ago, but Yoon persisted. Something in the data pattern bothered her. Inconsistencies that suggested the information they'd been given by the Juxar wasn't completely accurate. "There it is," she whispered as a new file opened, displaying what appeared to be historical records. The translation software struggled with some concepts, but the timeline was clear enough. Yoon grabbed her phone and called her supervisor despite the late hour. "Sir, I need to present my findings to the council immediately," she said when he answered. "It's about the war. The Juxar, they lie to us." The next morning, Earth's United Defense Council gathered in their secure underground chamber. Representatives from every major nation sat around the large circular table, faces grim as Dr. Yoon connected her computer to the main display screen. "Thank you for convening on such short notice," she began, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "I've completed analysis of the Confederation data cores recovered last month." She brought up a timeline of the conflict between the Confederation and the Juxar. According to the Juxar, the Confederation attacked their colony worlds without provocation 26 years ago, beginning this war, Yoon explained. However, the Confederation records tell a different story. She highlighted several dates on the timeline. These records show the Juxar systematically infiltrated resource-rich systems at the edge of Confederation space. When diplomatic warnings failed, the Confederation blockaded these systems. The Juxar attacked the blockade, beginning the conflict. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "They weren't attacked first," she concluded. "The Juxar initiated this conflict to seize resource-rich systems. They've been manipulating us." Defense Secretary Lee leaned forward. "Are you certain these records are authentic?" "The encryption patterns match other Confederation data we verified," Yoon confirmed. "And there's more. The Juxar have been withholding significant technological information from us, while we've been giving them our best tactical minds." President Du, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. "So we've been fighting on the wrong side of an interstellar resource war." "It appears so, Madam President," Yoon replied. The revelation sparked heated debate among the council members. Some argued for immediate withdrawal from the alliance, while others cautioned against hasty action that might leave Earth vulnerable to Juxar retaliation. Meanwhile, across the compound in the engineering division, Chief Engineer Ba supervised the final tests on the modified propulsion system. His team had spent months reverse engineering the Juxar drive technology. "Run the simulation again," he instructed his assistant. "Let's see if the efficiency increase holds." The massive screens displayed a virtual model of their prototype engine, now modified with human-designed components. The simulation showed energy output 20% higher than the original Juxar design. "It works," his assistant said, amazed. "They never considered reconfiguring the containment field this way." Bai nodded. "Their technology is advanced, but their thinking is linear. They don't innovate well." By combining Juxar technology with human ingenuity, Earth's engineers had created vessels that could match or exceed Juxar ships in speed and firepower. The first 3 prototype ships were already complete, hidden in a facility beneath the Pacific Ocean. After 3 days of deliberation, President Du made her decision. She summoned Admiral Sun from his position with the Juxar fleet for a secure briefing, then authorized secret diplomatic channels to the Confederation. "We need to understand their perspective directly," she told her advisors. "If we're going to extricate ourselves from this situation, we need options." The first contact was made through a neutral trading species that dealt with both sides of the conflict. Initial messages were cautious, with the Confederation understandably suspicious of human intentions. However, when Earth shared Dr. Yoon's findings along with an offer to cease hostilities, the Confederation agreed to preliminary talks. Unfortunately, Juxar intelligence was more effective than Earth had anticipated. Within weeks, they detected unusual transmission patterns from Earth's communications array. Analysis suggested diplomatic exchanges with their enemy. General Sang reported directly to Supreme Commander Da. "The humans have made contact with the Confederation," he said, his facial tendrils twitching with agitation. "They may be planning to switch sides." Da's reaction was swift. "Cut off their communications, restrict their access to our systems, and detain any human officers in sensitive positions." The orders went out immediately, but the Juxar underestimated how deeply humans had integrated into their command structure. When Juxar officers attempted to restrict access to the communication systems on the flagship, they discovered the humans had already created backdoor access points months earlier. Colonel Nam, commanding the human contingent aboard the Juxar flagship Dominant Will, received encrypted orders from Earth hours before the Juxar moved to isolate them. "Secure control of communications array. Prepare for independent action." Nam gathered his officers in their private quarters. "The situation has changed," he explained quietly. "Earth has discovered the Juxar misrepresented the nature of this conflict. We've been authorized to take control of this vessel if necessary." Lieutenant Park looked concerned. "There are over 3,000 Juxar crew members, and only 200 of us. We don't need to control the entire ship," Nam explained. "Just the critical systems. We've been placing our people in key positions for months, and we have the access codes thanks to Captain Su's team." That night, as the majority of the Juxar crew rested, human forces moved silently through the vast ship. They wore standard uniforms and moved with purposeful confidence, arousing no suspicion as they assumed positions at critical junctions, communication hubs, and engineering sections. At precisely 300 hours, they executed their plan. Engineering teams locked down propulsion and life support systems. Security teams secured weapons caches and sealed off command sections. Communication specialists took control of internal and external channels. By morning, they controlled all critical systems without firing a single shot. Most of the Juxar crew awoke to find themselves locked out of their stations, unable to access ship functions or communicate with each other. From the main bridge, now staffed entirely by humans, Colonel Nam broadcast a message throughout the ship and to Juxar High Command. "This is Colonel Nam of Earth Defense Forces. This vessel now operates under Earth authority. All Juxar personnel are instructed to remain in their quarters. No harm will come to anyone who cooperates." He paused before adding, "We suggest you prepare for negotiations." The response from Juxar High Command was immediate and furious. Supreme Commander Da himself sent a communication demanding the return of the vessel and threatening severe consequences. Nam's reply was calm but firm. "Your deception about the origins of this war has been discovered. Earth is withdrawing from our alliance. We will return your ship and crew safely after our personnel throughout Juxar space have been extracted. Until then, we maintain control of the Dominant Will as insurance against retaliation." As his officers managed the ship's systems, Nam sent a private message to Earth. Phase 1 complete. Awaiting further instructions. The artificial moon hung between worlds, a perfectly spherical station constructed specifically for neutrality. Its silvery surface reflected the light of an aging red star, creating an almost mystical glow that bathed the arriving ships in crimson light. President Du stood at the viewport of the Earth vessel, watching as the Juxar and Confederation ships docked at opposite sides of the station. The past year had been the most challenging of her political career. After Colonel Nam's daring seizure of the Juxar flagship, Earth had leveraged its position to broker a ceasefire. "We're ready, Madam President," said her aide. Du nodded. "And our security teams. In position throughout the station, Captain Su's units have secured all critical areas. The diplomatic chamber at the heart of the station was a marvel of design, incorporating elements from all three cultures. The walls displayed shifting scenes from Earth, Juxar territories, and Confederation worlds. The round table had no head, emphasizing equality among the delegates. President Du entered alongside Earth's delegation. The Juxar representatives, led by Supreme Commander Da, sat rigidly in seats modified for their larger forms. The Confederation delegation, with Elder Min at its center, maintained a calm, almost meditative presence. For 3 days, they negotiated. The discussions were tense, often heated. The Juxar demanded return of territories they'd held for decades. The Confederation insisted on reparations for the initial aggression. Earth pushed for open trade routes and technology exchange. On the 4th day, President Du stood before the assembled delegates. Her simple black suit contrasted with the elaborate ceremonial garments of the alien representatives. "This war has caused enough suffering," she began, her voice firm yet compassionate. "Millions have died. Worlds have been devastated. Resources that could have benefited all have been wasted on destruction." She gestured to the document displayed on each delegate's screen. "The terms before you benefit no single party but establish lasting peace. The contested border systems will become independent zones with open trade to all. The Juxar retain mining rights in the outer sectors. The Confederation maintains cultural protection for worlds with indigenous populations." She paused, making eye contact with each faction leader. "Earth will serve as neutral peacekeepers along the established borders. Our forces have proven their capability, but our true strength lies in our neutrality. We have no historical claims in this region of space. We seek only stability and mutual prosperity." The chamber fell silent as the delegates considered her words. Finally, Elder Min of the Confederation spoke. "We have fought the Juxar for nearly 30 years, he said, his translated voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the room. "We considered humans primitive when we first observed your world. Yet in 1 year, you have achieved what we could not in 3 decades. He turned to his delegation. "I support these terms." Supreme Commander Da's facial tendrils twitched with barely contained emotion. "The Juxar do not surrender," he said stiffly. "This is not surrender," President Du replied. "It is evolution. Your people gain security and prosperity without the constant drain of warfare." After a long moment, Da gave a sharp nod. "We accept the terms." The treaty was signed that day, bringing an official end to a conflict that had spanned generations for some of the alien species. As the delegates celebrated with a ceremonial meal, the Confederation Council gathered in a private chamber for an extraordinary session. Elder Min addressed his fellow counselors with grave seriousness. "Today we must acknowledge an oversight that nearly cost us this war. We underestimated humanity based on their technological development rather than their adaptive capabilities." The Council voted unanimously to amend their charter with a new warning: never involve humans in your conflicts unless absolutely necessary. Their capacity for warfare exceeds all known species. 6 months later, Earth's first orbital diplomatic station became operational. The massive structure orbited Earth like a shining wheel, with docking bays for vessels from 24 alien worlds. Admiral Sun stood in the observation lounge, watching ships arrive for the inaugural conference. Beside him stood Commander Tai of the Confederation, the same officer who had originally observed Earth years earlier. "Your ascension has been remarkable," Tai commented. "No species in recorded history has moved from planetary isolation to galactic influence so quickly." Sun smiled slightly. "We had motivation. Once we knew we weren't alone, we had to catch up." "Your warriors are exceptional," Ta noted. "Many species fear humans now." "We never wanted to be warriors," Sun told his alien counterpart. "We just happen to be very good at it. Our true strength is in building connections, finding compromises where others see only conflict." Tay's large eyes studied the human carefully. "I believe you mean that, which makes your species even more fascinating." 3 years passed. Earth established itself as a neutral power in galactic politics, sending peacekeeping forces to troubled regions and hosting diplomatic conferences for species in conflict. Human innovations merged with alien technologies, creating new solutions to old problems. At a major Confederation diplomatic gathering, Elder Min, now ancient even by his species standards, his gray skin nearly translucent with age, addressed the assembled representatives from over 50 worlds. "We have observed countless species rise and fall across the millennia." His translated voice echoed through the chamber. Some advanced through technological brilliance, others through cultural unity, still others through sheer determination. He gestured to the human delegates seated among them. "But these humans, they don't just adapt to the galaxy. They make the galaxy adapt to them. They question assumptions we've held for centuries. They find connections between ideas we considered separate. They bring together what was divided." He raised his long, thin hand in the traditional Confederation gesture of respect. "We feared their capacity for war, but we should have recognized their even greater capacity for peace." As the galactic community grew accustomed to human involvement, a new protocol emerged in formerly contested regions. Human peacekeeping vessels, marked with distinctive blue and green lights, carried respected mixed-species crews trained in both combat and mediation. Along contested borders throughout the galaxy, warships now carried a universal warning beacon when human peacekeepers approached. "Attention all vessels. Human mediators inbound. Disarm weapon systems immediately." It was the most consistently obeyed order in galactic history. 5 years after the peace treaty, Captain Su, now General Su, stood on the bridge of the Earth peacekeeping vessel Harmony as it patrolled the former conflict zone between Juxar and Confederation space. Where battles once raged, trade ships now passed freely. Former enemies worked together on joint mining operations and scientific outposts. His second-in-command, a young lieutenant, looked out at the stars with wonder. "Is it true you were in the first human unit deployed with the Juxar?" she asked. Su nodded. "In a basin that was supposed to be a death trap. And now we're keeping the peace instead of fighting their war." She shook her head in amazement. "How did we manage all this so quickly?" Su smiled slightly. "By remembering what truly makes humans dangerous in war." "What's that, sir?" "Our creativity. Our adaptability." He turned from the viewport to face her. "The same qualities that make us valuable in peace." The end.